Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out today. Before we get started, there are just a couple of things to get out of the way. First and foremost, we are in the midst of a pandemic, so please be sure to keep your mask on at all times and keep 6 feet between you and your neighbor. We do have masks and water available over there if you need them. We also have many books and resources available for checkout, courtesy of our school and local library. And we also have information sheets, so we greatly encourage you to further educate yourself after this rally. We also have a voter registration available. I know that there are a lot of young people here, so I encourage you to get out and vote when you can, because your vote is your voice. We also want to, we also want to give one big last thank you to Super Sounds Entertainment for helping us make this event possible. Yes, and I would like to thank everybody who's donated their time and their energy to all of this cause, and everybody who is here. We need everybody here to make this happen. So before we begin, I would like to welcome someone who is going to talk about who this land first belonged to. So please welcome Catherine. Here.
So I want to just take a moment and ask you just to pause wherever you are and feel your feet on this ground. And take a look at the sky above you. And take a look around. We're standing on the unceded territory of the Abenaki Nation. This land is called Indakana. And I want to acknowledge that many lives have been given so that we can have the privilege of being here today on this land. Wado miigwech.
Now we would like to welcome a very special speaker to us, Rajni Edens.
Peace, how y'all doing? It's my honor and it's such a blessing to be here with you all today in honor of Emmett Till's birthday and standing in solidarity for our collective liberation. You can clap for that, that's right. It takes us all. I'm going to share a piece in his honor, in honor of all the fallen. It's called For Trayvon, Mike Brown, and the Countless Unnamed. Lynching is not dead. It's done in broad daylight, under the hot lights of media frenzy, for black blood, white guilt, white fear, and white acquittal, where brown boys are still expendable. Michael Vick should have had Zimmerman's lawyer. Brown boys are worth less than black dogs. Trayvon should have been a brown lab. Maybe then we'd see more of a humane society's presence. If poems could march in the streets, overturn verdicts, bring corrupt police to justice, if they could bring a boy back his life and a mother back her son, a father back his boy, return bullets to a gun, unloose the lynch rope and unravel the knots from choke throats, we would not be choking on tears. When do our lives become valuable in the eyes of the law? When does hate cease to be exonerated behind a badge and lighter skin? And God forbid you wear a hoodie in the rain while having black skin with Skittles in your pocket. You can taste the rainbow, but you can't taste freedom. You can taste your own blood, but you can't taste the rainbow. Diversity is white people's code word for niggers. You can taste the rainbow, but not if you're too dark. The rainbow may come during the storm. If you're too dark on a block, in a hoodie, and the Skittles fall from your pocket, You never taste the rainbow. Your killer has the right to stand his ground. He may shoot you in the heart, and America may relive it in sordid detail. She is only reliving her nightmares. She dreams nightmares often. Open caskets, ashes, weighted limbs, no coffins. 2. His name is Trayvon Martin. Say it. Renee Davis. Khalif Browder. Corey Jones. Freddie Gray. Breonna Taylor. George Floyd. Terrence Sterling. Terrence Crutcher. Joseph Mann. Tyree King. Elijah McClain. Keith Lamont Scott. Alfred Alongo. Alton Sterling. Corin Gaines. Oscar Grant. Jordan Baker. Philando Castile. The Charleston Nine. Larry Eugene Jackson. Sean Bell. Sandra Bland. Natasha McKenna. Rakina Jones. Darnisha Harris. Alicia Thomas. Tarika Wilson. Benzel Hampton. Giovanni McDade. Aaron Campbell. Rennell Lewis. Dante Parker. Jonathan Farrell. Eric Garner. Ezel Ford. Omar Abrego. Keith Vidal. Michael Brown. Akai Gurley. Romaine Brisbane. Darian Hunt. Tamir Rice. Jason Harrison. Kendra McDade. Chavez Carter. Yvette Smith. Luis Rodriguez. Matthew Paulo. Amadou Diallo. His name, he has a name. His name is I Can't Breathe. His name is Emmett Till. His name. You must remember his name. James Byrd Jr. He may whisper it in the wind. You may hear it in your skin. His name is Guilty. In his innocence. Freedom fighter. Martyr. Troublemaker. His name. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, he has a name. His name is Black Boy. Blacklisted. Blackballed. His name is Black Power. Black babies in the black market for green cash. Stolen life. Tied to a tree. Burnt at the stake. His name. Probable cause. The Negro problem. Chalk outline. White man's fear. His name Ear for souvenir. His name Black Nigger Boy. Fred Hampton. Huey P. Newton. Medgar Evers. His name saves lives, mobilizes movements. His name is Watch for a Black Messiah. Bullet to the heart. Boy in jaws of wolf. White girl called rape. Whistle too free. Head too high. His name looked me in my eye. His name must die. Gangster, thug, menace, stereotype. His name is Wretched Like Demon. His name is Take Him to the Iron Bridge on Main Street. His name's legs are pulled until its neck cracks. Stabbed, hung, shot, burned, ravaged by relic hunters. His name is Mistaken Identity. Scottsboro Boys. Tuskegee Experiments. David Walker. Living, breathing black manhood. Heathen, pagan, no salvation. His name is You Free Nigga, get over it. Kunta Kinte. Stolen African. Strange fruit. Stranger in a strange land. In danger of deranged hands. Enemy of the state. Genetic dissenter. Asphalt art. Bloody memory. Collateral damage. White man's burden. That happened so long ago. Chain gang, wage slave, chattel. On the rack, in the irons, on the run. Wanted. His name is arthritic hands that felt more thistles than cotton. His name is Put Your Hands Up. Spread them. Stop or I'll shoot. His name is Bang. 41 shots. Asada Shakur. Angela Davis. Breakfast Program. Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. His name is, he has a name. His name is beaten severely, urinated on, chained by the ankles. His name is dragged for 3 miles and decapitated. 81 places have the remains. His name is missing an arm. His name is crackhead, war on drugs, war on poverty, scapegoat, sacrificial lamb. His name is kicked carcass, convict, criminal, thief, drug dealer, Victim, still a child, his name will never breathe again. His name has a mother. His name is expendable. Sundown laws, Jim Crow cars, Jim Crow bars. His name is racial profiling. In court, just call him profiling, because this is not about race. His name is Marcus Garvey, Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells. No rights a white man is bound to respect. His name has a title when he dies. His name is Mr. Martin, wearer of the black hoodie, walker of the home path, wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin, wrong crime. His name is holder of the Skittles. His name, his mother knows his name. Her tears spell it in big, bold letters down her cheeks. His name is gone too soon. His name is Darky, Spook, Jigaboo, Sambo. His name is different. Too difficult to be pronounced by thin lips with forked tongues. His name dies without justice. Missing, lost, bottom of the ocean, shark food, triangle trade of littered bones. His name is Sunchild, star fruit, young, gifted, and black, but you can call him nigger. His name, he has a name. His name is the sun is rising. His name is Wake Up! I know his name because his name is mine. For those of you that can, please take a knee as we stand or sit in a moment of silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
We knelt for a brother that has fallen, that has been torn down, that has risen. And one day with him, we will rise. But until then, a change is gonna come.
Thank you.
I think you all would agree I could keep listening to that, so I wasn't about to get up here. I thought they might do an encore. Thank you. Yeah. I really want to thank Serena for putting this event together, as far as I am aware, and probably a lot of other folks who helped as well. Thank you. I want to thank Serena's mother, who raised her right to really think about what the community needs. I want to thank Rajni, and I've known him a long time. I'm so glad to finally see how much he's getting recognition around the state and beyond, and I hope you all will join me in working to make him the next Poet Laureate of Vermont. And I really want to thank everyone who came out and braved the heat, and our elders who've come out. This is a lot. I think like the aunts are really after me. And I really especially want to thank the children. I was sitting next to a little girl and her mom, I believe, and she was struggling through that 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but they did it. And I just kept thinking, I hope, and I looked at her as we were listening to Rajni share the names, and I hope that she grows up and all the kids here grow up to know more living black boys than dead black boys' names. That's my hope. And that is not easy in Vermont, right? So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Keisha Ram. I'm a candidate for state senate in Chittenden County, and if I'm elected, I would be the youngest woman and the first woman of color to ever serve in the Vermont Senate. Thank you, and you know, I treat that, especially in this moment, you know, not just as a great privilege and something that would be an honor, but an incredible responsibility to the people of Vermont. An incredible responsibility to make sure that I am certainly not the last, and that I have brought up a folding chair in the past, but no more. People of color are going to have a seat at the table in Montpelier. So I feel like today is a day for hard truths, and I feel like y'all are ready to hear them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be acknowledging Emmett Till's 79th birthday, which could have happened. He could have been here. Just like Tamir Rice could have graduated high school this year, right? And so when I think about Emmett Till, I think about some hard truths that we need to acknowledge here in Vermont. You know, first of all, we think a lot when I don't know about you all, but in the history books, we read about Emmett Till. It was part of our civil rights understanding. It was seen as a spark that changed things. But more than we knew the torture that he went through, how his limbs were torn apart, how law enforcement was involved in his death, how everyone looked the other way. We heard this story, right? I'm going to speak for myself as a 34-year-old. I heard a story in school that he said bye baby to a white woman. And that's why he was lynched. That's why he was dragged behind a car. That's why he was killed. So even in his death, we talk more about, well, but what did he do? Right? What happened that day? And we know now that that story probably isn't true, but it lives on. It has a life of its own. And it stays with us when we think about Michael Brown, and when we think about George Floyd, and when we think about Breonna Taylor, who was sleeping. When we think about people and we ask, well, what did they do? Did they do something to step out of line? Did they do something to provoke this? Don't ever let anyone ask that again. And we've all had that happen. We need to stop that. And second of all, I want to say, you know, it's one of those stories, too, that we think, oh, this poor young black boy, he went to visit his country cousins in the South. And that was the problem, right? He went to the South. And in the South, people are overtly racist, and he would have been safer in the North, where his family had moved him in the Great Migration. And we just have to sort of send off the South, and it's, you know, it's dangerous to go there. It's dangerous to be a black person anywhere in America. It's dangerous here in Vermont to be a black person. It's dangerous to be a black person in school. It's dangerous to be a black person walking down the street. And so we have to acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do here in Vermont. This is our work as well. And we know Philando Castile, you know, name a lot, George Floyd, right? Minnesota. This happens in northern states. And we're trying, so I'm part of an effort right now with some folks around the state to rename Negro Brook in Windham County. We have a brook called Negro Brook. There were a lot of black folks who lived around this brook. And people got together and asked the library board, they said, we want to rename it for a woman named Susanna Toby, who was one of those black women who lived there. And it's believed that she was part of a multi-generational family, and she did a lot to take care of that land and steward that land. And we'd like to name that brook Susanna Toby Brook. Well, wouldn't you believe, this is the first time our Vermont Library Board has said, you know what? We're actually going to give preference to the name that local people want in a renaming. Before in the state, anyone in the state could bring a petition to rename something. And this is the first time they've said, we're really going to listen to local folks. Now, we hope that local folks in Windham County will support this effort, but we also know there's a group of white historians there who want to name it after a white person now that the name is going to get changed. So as we look and say, oh, they're pulling down Confederate statues in the South, and, you know, thank goodness, and they're finally dealing with their backwards history, we still have the names up on buildings of people who were known eugenicists, who tried to erase indigenous people from the history of this land, who frankly pushed away a lot of Buffalo soldiers and black people here who thought, that's going to be me next, so I better go. So there's a reason that Vermont is white, and if we don't reckon with that, then we are no better than where Emmett Till was killed. We are no better. You know, and finally, I just want to say, I think it's really, you know, we often say, oh, young people, like, you give us hope, you know, right? I mean, we think, oh, well, Emmett Till was 14 years old, and we've come so far. And now, you know, that is much less likely to happen to a 14-year-old. Well, I am a pretty light-skinned, privileged person of color, right? My father's from India. My mother's Jewish. I grew up in an Irish pub. I had a very different experience than black Americans. When I was 13 years old, I was arrested by the LAPD, and the first and second question they asked were, are you Mexican? Are you sure you're not Mexican? And I'm not at all comparing that to what happened to Emmett Till, but kids of color go through traumatic events before their 14th birthday all the time in this country. All the time, those same memories, those past traumas are brought back up for people of color, and especially black folks, all the time. And so, you know, when you think about how, you know, these young people are rising up and are making a difference, you know, they shouldn't just give you hope. And that's what I want to end on. You know, I don't want to look at young people and say, yeah, you give me hope. You give me courage. You're working through a lot of stuff. You're living in the state of Vermont, and you give me courage to do this work. So I just want to say thank you all. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Can you hear me when I'm this tall? You can hear me? Okay. My name's Chuck Lacey. I live right up the road here in Jericho Center. I'm on the school board. The history of race in Vermont goes like this. We abolished slavery in 1777. We fought in the Civil War. No blacks live here. We are better than the other white people. The end. Our Vermont white innocence is our Confederate flag. I've spent my COVID evenings reading back issues of Vermont newspapers online, back to the 1700s. Here's some of what I found. My family first settled in Vermont in 1761. And they lived among enslaved people and slave owners for 50 years. My ancestors helped shape the 1707 Vermont Constitution, which said adults ought not be held as slaves. Our Constitution didn't abolish slavery. It permitted childhood slavery, up to 18 years old for girls and women, and up to 21 years old for young men. Were there 18-year-old boys and girls, were there 8 years old boys and girls held as slaves in Vermont? Yes, there were. The founders passed no laws against adult slavery either. Imagine the pain of these black families, half slave, half free, trying to stay together, knowing that family members could be sold to New York or Virginia out of contact into lifelong slavery. One of my ancestors served on the Vermont Supreme Court with a slave owner. Another ancestor recruited an out-of-state slave owner to be the pastor of his church in Bennington. Another ancestor was one of the first Vermont senators. He voted for the 1793 Fugitive Slave Act, along with the other Vermont senator. This was the law that required Vermonters to capture and send people escaping slavery back to New York or Virginia. That's the law that made the Underground Railroad necessary. In the 1790s and beyond, Vermont newspapers had ads with rewards for people capturing people who were escaping slavery, for capturing them and sending them back. Vermont's first real opposition to American slavery, as slavery was growing, was the Vermont Colonization Society, formed in 1819, endorsed by the Vermont legislature, led by Vermont's leading citizens, and organized mostly by pastors and churches. But they didn't want freedom for blacks. They wanted freedom from blacks. Their mission was to send them all back to Africa. Their charter said to remove all Negroes free and enslaved from the United States to Liberia. Later, a new generation of young activists in the late 1830s dedicated their lives to promoting American abolition. They were young. They were quicker with technology. They were better connected, ready to challenge church and state and their parents' generation like today's young heroes. They succeeded in turning the majority of opinion in Vermont to abolition before the Civil War. But make no mistake, slavery was debated in Vermont pro and con right up to the Civil War. One of my ancestors went to the convention in Charleston, South Carolina, the Democratic Convention, which ultimately formed the Confederacy. Reading the papers from after the Civil War, I did not see new respect for black bodies. I read the papers, all through the 18th century. We excluded black Vermonters from our Civil War monuments. In 1913 in Bolton, our Bolton, 3 young white men murdered a young black man because they thought he stole their lunch. Vermont newspapers covered that trial day by day, point by point, publishing transcripts, but they didn't mention the victim's name. The newspapers, the judge, the prosecutor all called him the Negro, or the ne'er-do-well Negro. For the record, his name was Sam Rounds. I kept reading Vermont newspapers into the 1920s, when white Anglo-America was panicked about immigration. Jews, Catholics, Russians, Japanese, Negroes, and Chinese coming to the United States. In 1924, the Burlington Free Press spoke to the Vermont mood by saying, "The time has come in the history of America when many of us want to see the greatest nation become a race, homogeneous through common blood ties. The process will take decades, centuries perhaps, and it's time to start. we should ban all non-Nordics. That's not the Third Reich. That's Vermont's largest newspaper running an editorial. Vermont's legendary Senator William Dillingham led a Senate investigation on immigration, and he presented that study, 3 million subjects. He wrote a dictionary of races that ranked immigrants by nation and ethnicity in order of desirability. That dictionary, his dictionary, and his plan produced the 1924 Immigration Act, which ended almost all immigration to the United States by Jews, Africans, Japanese, and Chinese. The bill was signed by Calvin Coolidge. When he signed it, he said, "America must remain American." Almost all of the immigration quotas went to Northern European Nordics. That law persisted until 1965. In his sequel to Mein Kampf in 1928, Adolf Hitler admired how this law, designed by Vermonters, signed by Calvin Coolidge, affected America's push to be a young, in quotes from Adolf Hitler, a young racially select people with immigration dependent on specific racial requirements. In the years before the Holocaust, this law prevented millions of Jews from immigrating to the United States and other countries who were following our lead, and it ended immigration from Africa. This should be part of our Vermont history. In 1961, after the Second World War, Vermont was still clear about who was and who wasn't eligible to be a Vermonter. Of the 17 major hotels and lodges in Stowe, 14 of them did not accept Jewish or black guests. In 1961, the Burlington area Chamber of Commerce did a survey. They said that 57% of Burlington area hotels did not serve black guests. Less than a third of the Burlington area hotels in 1961 would let the chamber put them on a list of hotels serving blacks. In the 1950s, black Air Force service members stationed at the Ethan Allen Air Force Base couldn't find housing in Vermont. The churches took on the problem. In one article, they described how the churches were making calls for 20 black families who couldn't find houses in Burlington to rent or to buy. When a realtor showed a black physician and his family a house in Burlington, the neighbors organized. The realtor told the Free Press he got 15 or 20 calls and threats from whites in the neighborhood. He offered to pay the contractor to take the house off the market. In 1961, a Vermont probate judge refused to allow a white couple to adopt a mixed-race baby. The Vermont judge said of the baby, and this is a quote from the judge, "She's not 1/4 Negro, she's Negro. I will not make birth records that show a Negro child with white parents." This is 6 years before the Loving decision, when the Supreme Court forced the southern states to permit interracial marriage. When Bull Connor turned the fire hoses on the children of Birmingham, the Burlington Free Press editorials blamed the Negroes. They called Martin Luther King and Jackie Robinson Negro agitators with no respect for law and order. I could list these examples all afternoon. You could look for them yourselves. They're all online, reading the old newspapers. But we shouldn't wonder why Vermont is 95% white. It's not an accident. That's how we envisioned it. We're not a different kind of white people. We are the same as the rest of white Americans. We lie about Vermont slavery so we can take a pass on the next 250 years of Vermont history. This myth is our heritage. It's our Confederate flag. And it's a white myth. It's going to be hard to take down, and it's not up to black Vermonters to take that myth down for us. we don't need black people in the room to talk about our myth. Our myth is our myth. And the name of the young man, just another couple words about the man in Bolton. He came from Maryland. He saw an ad for looking for labor to work on a dam in Essex. He came up and did not get the job at the job at Essex. I don't know why. And he was headed south, and these three men thought he stole their lunch. I have descriptions of the rocks and the place of the murder. I think it's behind Smiley School, and I hope some MMU students will help me do the research and we can find that location and see what we can do to make sure that people remember the name of Sam Rounds. Thank you.
All right, so I didn't plan on speaking today, but someone said it's time for harsh truths, so I'm gonna let y'all have it. Raise your hand if you know any black people in Mount Mansfield. Okay, now raise your hand if you can tell me why they're not here. What environment are you creating to the point where black people can't even come to a rally that represents them, that fights for their life? I don't need a clap. I need you to hold yourself accountable. I'm asking another question. When some of y'all sat down and said, what can I do for this movement? How many of y'all thought coming here was helping? Coming here with your lawn chair was doing all you could. On the birthday of Emmett Till, too many white people came up here and spoke. I went to BHS, and as lovely and diverse of a place they try to make it seem, that cafeteria was split black and white. But the only thing I knew about MMU was that one racist girl in my basketball game said, get out of my fucking way, nigger. We can sit here, we can have a moment of silence, we can clap along to the one black voice who decided to speak today. But that doesn't change that there's children in this school who are not here. There's children who go here who are not here. And will you hold them accountable? Will you do the work when it starts getting cold out here? When the winter hits and we all want to hibernate? It's not enough to sit here and talk about what's happening. What's next? There's been enough rallies in Vermont. Where's the action? Where's the justice? Because without justice, there is no peace. The amount of people I've seen on their phones, the amount of people I've seen too comfortable for a conversation that's supposed to make you uncomfortable has nothing to do about who you are, but your identity. That is your whiteness showing. When I look at this park, that is your privilege showing. Now, my last question. How many of y'all were in Montpelier about 2 hours ago? Now, black people, keep your hands up. If that doesn't make you sick, if that doesn't make you sick to your stomach, that out of everyone in Vermont, the black people had to go to Montpelier, stand in front of these racist people with their guns on their hips to prove to them that we matter. We could talk about how white Vermont is, but let's not ignore how complicit Vermont is. If you feel uncomfortable, I'm speaking to you. It's not enough to post on Instagram, show up to one rally, and not do the work behind it. Because we are doing that work. We shouldn't have to, but we're doing it because you are not. Happy birthday, Emmett.
So I'm going to actually have Zenavia come back up. I'm going to have Trey come up with me. If you are a black or brown individual, I want you to come up here as well and stand with me. I don't want anybody clapping for anyone. I'm about to get real as fuck. If you guys have white children that don't like swears or you don't swear in front of them, cover their fucking ears. Oh, you don't have to run. We'll wait for you guys. You're good. Relax. There's a lot of white people out here very fucking relaxed right now, so you guys relax, take your time. Yeah, if you guys want, some definitely can come over here too. You guys are not ready for what I have to say, but I could give two shits. Let me break something down to you. And I talk to everybody in the back. If you guys want to come closer, excuse me, I see a cop. If you guys want to come a little closer, that would be great. If not, just stand where the fuck you are. You guys in the back, if you want to come a little bit closer, great. Guys, I see more than 6 feet of space. So if you actually are here to listen to the fucking words that we have to say, stand the fuck up, stop being so fucking comfortable with yourselves, or continue to sit down. I could give two shits. Make a decision right now. Make a decision right now. Then sit. Yeah, you're good. There are some of you still sitting, and I'm glad. No, take your time. Take your time. Please sit. Please sit. If you're still sitting, please sit. I wouldn't want to take advice from a nigger either. There's a struggle out here. There's a serious struggle out here. And you know what, real quick, before I get going, take my hat, bro. Raise your fucking hand if you're here and you're media, or if you're a newspaper, or if you're representing something that I don't work for. Raise your hand if you work for any sort of media. Please, please raise your hand. Raise your hand if you work for any sort of media. I'm really looking right now. I know somebody's lying because you guys mess up all the fucking time. All the time. All the time. I'm putting you to work today, so I apologize. If you are media, hear what I'm saying. Don't quote me. Don't say he said. Don't say he alleged. Don't use those words. Because basically what you're saying, when you're saying I allegedly said this or that, you're basically ignoring that I'm fucking here in the first place. You're basically ignoring the fact that I have something to say that makes you uncomfortable. It makes you so uncomfortable that you would rather interpret it in your own way. You interpret what I'm doing right now. If I say fuck, I'm angry. If I say hold up, I'm pushing back. I'm looking you all dead in your face. I asked you one thing specifically, just barely, if you're in the back to come closer. That would imply that if you're in the front, I need you to come closer as well. So please do that. If you're in the front, come closer as well. I want people in the back to be as close as fucking possible because I got some truth. And I'm not standing up here throwing politics at you. I'm not looking for votes. I'm not saying anything to you guys that I wouldn't say to fucking any one of these individuals that are up here right now. I was adopted at the age of 3 years old. I came from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I didn't have a fucking choice but to move here. I didn't have a choice. That choice was made for me by the age of 3. What's the first thing you think I noticed, obviously, at the age of 3, coming from Baton Rouge, Louisiana? It's just white. White, 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 white. Zanavia brought up a great point, and it pisses me off. We all, most of us, were in Montpelier. And this is perfect, because I'm telling you right now, Montpelier is like, what, 40 minutes, 50 minutes max from here? I'm asking you guys a question. Thank you. 35, I appreciate you. You might be a journalist. 35 minutes away. And all of you, again, speaking to you all as individuals at this point, as a group, excuse me, you guys couldn't make the trip because you were about to do something that puts yourselves in a situation where you're like, perfect. I got my quota for the year. I'm no longer racist. I am, but I don't have to admit it because I can fall back on this. I can fall back on the fact that I came to a rally, which, mind you, Black Perspective, what's up? If it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for everybody that's standing right here, there would be no fucking black people here. No offense to the gentleman that came up, the older gentleman that came up and he spoke. No offense to you at all. But as a black man, I must say, we're here for our fucking ancestors. That's who we're here for. We're not here for your ancestors. We're not here for your ancestors. Last time I checked, your ancestors made me get on this fucking mic today pissed off. If you're a journalist, remember what I just said, okay? Quote that. Quote what I just said. Don't just say a black man said he was pissed off. Don't just say a black man allegedly said he was pissed off. I am pissed off. I am. I had an individual, an older lady in Montpelier. As I'm standing, supporting my people, she looks in my face. Mind you, she's like 80, 90. The way she was yelling, I'm thinking to myself like, yo, this might be your last rally if you don't chill. Straight up. I was like, wow, she's really mad. She was so mad because I was breathing in a space she was also breathing in. She was mad because I was breathing in a space she was also breathing in. She was mad that I was rising in a space that she was just there for. I asked her, I'm like, listen, no, my bad. She asked me, do not all lives matter? Like, so hold up. I'm gonna speak to, hold up. I'd say raise your hand if you're white, but pretty much we figured that shit out already. So listen, I want somebody to come up here, a white representative, if you will, and I'm gonna ask you a question. This is not to call you out. This is to not make you uncomfortable. This is to not say, yeah, we hate you, because we don't. But I want you to come up here real quick, just real quick. I'm gonna give you guys an example of what I'm talking about. Please, absolutely. What is your name?
Greta.
Greta. You guys can clap it up for Greta, please. Greta, how old are you?
17.
17 years old. Okay, listen, Greta, I just have a question. You're up here right now, right? Do you feel threatened? Do you feel like, are your parents here? Do you have family here?
No, I'm here with my friend.
Awesome, you're here with your friend. Perfect, excellent. What's your name, my man? Cole. Give it up for my man Cole over here. Absolutely. Now I'm speaking to you guys, so bear with me, okay? We go to a Blue Lives Matter event today that started at 10 a.m. We pretty much shut that shit down. However, Greta, thank you for coming up here. Again, you said you don't feel threatened. You don't feel concerned. You don't feel like you got to call 911. By the way, he's over there, so do us a favor. You don't need to call if you need him. He's right over there. The point that I'm trying to say is this. Greta, and I'm just speaking to you right now. I need everybody to listen. The entire event that took place at the State House, for some weird reason, they want to claim that all lives matter, right? We were there. All of us were there. Not one time, Greta, did they invite somebody onto the mic that didn't look like them. What I just did right here is show that all lives matter. This is the definition of all lives matter. Would you not agree with that?
I agree.
Thank you so much. Listen, Greta, not only did we show up, I want to say it was like 2 hours, 2-something hours that they were there. They were scheduled for like 3, 4, or 5, but once again, we shut that shit down. Listen, they couldn't do this, okay? They couldn't do this. What is your name?
Greta.
Your name is Greta. Where do you go to school?
CVU.
You go to CVU. What is your favorite sport?
I do theater.
Holy shit. Give it up for Greta in theater. Okay, Greta, we're still communicating. Now, you said you're here with your friend Cole, right?
Yeah.
Friend, or like? So you're here with your friend. Your friend is of a certain color, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. Do you agree with your friend standing with his fellow brothers and sisters?
Absolutely.
Why do you agree with that?
Because Cole can do whatever he wants.
Because it's a free country, supposedly, correct? I'm really glad you said that, because I want to talk about free. I was told by several white people that my opinions today, that my opinions aren't valid. That my perception, have you guys ever heard perception is way more powerful than reality? And doesn't that mean like whoever holds that perception, holds that idea, holds that opinion, isn't that saying more about them than it's saying about the actual reality of like the truth, right? It says more about them than anything. Greta, I'm back to you. What is your shoe size?
7.5.
It's getting weird, guys. Be careful. 7.5, perfect. Now, okay, perfect. Greta, tell me about me right now. I want you to explain, I want you to take this mic, and I want you to tell me about me. What do you know about me?
You're pretty tall, taller than me. You're wearing Timbs. They must be kind of hot in the sun. You have a beard. You were speaking?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
You have a phone in your pocket?
I do. How do you know it's a phone?
Probably like an iPhone.
That's all right. No, you're right. Absolutely. You're right.
Maybe.
Keep going. Done?
I don't know.
You done?
I assume you're a man?
And I appreciate that. Thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. He pronouns. I promise you that. Keep going. Is that it? Perfect. All right. Give her a round of applause real quick. I'm assuming you're a she. Okay. Should never assume. Greta, thank you. I asked you, and this is not picking on you at all. I asked you to tell me about me, right? This is great. This is just a prime example for the people out here to understand. The reason why I'm speaking longer is because literally, like, there wasn't really any black people speaking at all, and I want to make sure I take up that space. Greta, I am a black man. You already know that because everybody can see my skin color. The issue is it's tough for you to want to point that out. And it has nothing to do with you because, Greta, I believe you're an amazing human being. I absolutely believe you're an amazing human being. But when we talk about systematic racism, I'm not saying you're racist, but what I'm saying is society, your people, have made it extremely tough for you to accept me for who I am regardless, because you can't even actually say you're a black man. And it's not that you can't say it, it's that it's really hard for you to understand it in the context of actually speaking it, because that is how we are raised as people. We are not raised to, quote unquote, see color. If you see color, you're racist. Fuck you if you think that. What's fuck you in sign language, by the way? I really need to. It's like my main words. I need to know. We are not taught, you and I, we are not taught, us, we are not taught to see color. To see color. I was having a conversation with a woman by the name of Yvette. This woman, and I quote, said, because I asked her if she would come to our protest last weekend, in Newport, Vermont. This woman said, no, I will never go to, mind you, she has also claimed many times she doesn't see color. When I asked her if she would come to this protest and speak on behalf of her son that is in jail, she looked at me and said, and I quote, I don't go to black protests. So mind you, a woman that does not see color declared what it was, a black protest. It's very interesting. I want to ask you guys a question. Does that sound racist to you? There's a lot of people here. Does that sound racist to you? I hear people on this side. I don't hear fucking shit on this side. Does that sound racist to you? That woman is my mother. Mother. I could go on and on and on and on about this bitch. No, believe me, and I said bitch. If some of you are like, why would he call his mother a bitch? It's because of what I just said. I grew up that way. This woman never saw color. She never saw color. But she knew calling the cops on her 12-year-old kid would get him arrested. She knew calling the cops on her 14-year-old kid would get him arrested. At the age of 15, I'm being pepper sprayed, dragged out of my own home. Comfort, by the way. It's supposed to be comfortable there, right? I'm dragged out of my own home, pepper sprayed by cops because I didn't want to get arrested at the age of 15. I was scared shitless at the age of 15. So when I talk to you guys, and again, Greta, thank you so much. When I gave you the mic and I asked you, tell me about me, I knew you weren't even going to talk about the fact that I'm black, because systematically, you're not allowed to see color. Because these judges, these police officers, these state's attorneys, these neighbors that we all have, people from MMU, people from fucking all over Vermont, you guys, and I quote, don't see color. I had all of them come up here with me today because I wanted to make sure you saw us. I wanted to make sure you understood that we're not just here, okay? We're not just here. There's a reason. There's a reason why we're all here, okay? We're not just here. I'm begging you. Fuck begging. I'm asking. I shouldn't have to beg. See us. Greet us. Treat us the same way, because we are not threats. The threat is deep down in your fucking souls. You're so scared to see it for what it is. We are black people. We are Black American people, period. That is who we are. Queer, straight, you name it. This is who we are. Transgender. Guys, we are not threats. The threat literally is deep, deep in fucking side yourself. That is what it is. That is what it is. So if you can find time to go home and look in the goddamn mirror, you will realize that the person that you are threatened by, the people that you are threatened by, the ideas that you are scared of, the places and the things that you don't want to do because of something. That person is literally you. Literally you. Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right. So I'm not gonna tell you guys if you need to stay or leave or spread out or whatever. Not that that's a bad thing. I just don't want to have to manage it. But I do have something to say, and they are not my words. They are words written by a boy called a man called Akash Kushwaha. He's in Boston right now, recovering from Bell's palsy, but he really wanted to be here. He really wanted to be here, and this is what he has to say to you all. Black lives matter. Always have and always will. I'm not here to preach that fact. It should be obvious. It is obvious. Instead, I'm here to ask the white people now claiming to be anti-racist, where were you? Where were you before it was popular to post a black box? Where were you when MMU school curriculum and culture actively erased and deintegrated our non-white experiences? Where were you when we had to grow up in your white wilderness, when ruralized racism was too trivial for your outdoor adventures? I'm seeing Vermonters who called me an Al-Qaeda terrorist or habitually appropriated AAVE to spice up their personalities, now acting all anti-racist. I'm not saying that these people, that the white Vermonters more generally haven't grown. I'm saying that y'all have far more work to do. It took you witnessing a series of modern-day lynchings to call something out that's been ingrained in Vermont for generations. Racist settler ideologies and infrastructures permeate your pristine and privileged paradise. What's untouched nature and refreshing calmness to you is a living hell for Vermonters of color. So when I ask you where you've been, all I can say is not where we've ever been. If you're going to commit to anti-racist struggle, then you better commit for life. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially, and if not, your woke performances will be exposed as the vapid gestures that they are. This is your burden to carry. You need to educate yourselves. Don't tokenize us and expect us to teach you basic things about structural racism and settler colonialism. Because Vermont may be hyper-white now, but we've been here, and we'll be staying, and we'll be coming more and more. Now, to my BIPOC cougars, I acknowledge you. I acknowledge the isolation and pain y'all are feeling right now. But it's okay to cry, to despair at the state of the world. I know that there's few of us, but try to find comfort in each other. And don't be afraid to say no when white people ask you to shoulder the weight of problems that they should have been carrying 20 years ago, 50 years ago, centuries ago. And sure as hell don't tolerate bigots who want to intellectualize your struggle and treat it as some academic discussion to be debated, refuted, and forgotten. Pace yourselves. Sustain each other. Seriously, y'all, cougars of color, y'all are beautiful. Thank you. Okay, and next up, we are going to have our neighbor Anna sharing with us.
Which one? Where can I walk around? Hola a todos, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes. Muchísimas gracias por venir. Sé que hace calor. No hay mucha sombra. Gracias. Should I be using that one? Okay. Yeah. Technical difficulties, right? Como les decía, no hay mucha sombra, así que muchas gracias a todos. My name is Anna. I'm a neighbor here in Jericho. I've been living here for almost 4 years. I know my zip code very well, even though the woman at the gas station right across from JCAT, when I went inside to tell her that the pump wasn't working and I had to pay inside, her first response was, well, you have an accent. Are you sure you remember your zip code right? Imagine if she had said, well, you're getting on in years. Are you sure you remember your zip code right? Imagine if she had said, well, you're a woman. Are you sure you can remember your zip code right? Yeah, I've been going to that gas station twice a week for 4 years, and I knew my zip code. I am obviously not a black person. I am a Latinx immigrant. I am gonna be using, thank you. I'm gonna be using the term BILAPOC, which stands for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and other people of color. Okay. I want to acknowledge again that we're here on stolen Abenaki land. And I want to acknowledge again, my speech is not going to be about police brutality per se. So I want to acknowledge again that we are here in this latest wave of Black Lives Matter because of police brutality. So I don't want to lose sight of that, even though I want to speak to racism in general in Vermont. I am using my light-skinned, highly educated privilege to speak for all of my brown Latinx friends who would not be taken as seriously because of their thick accent or because their grammar is not as good as mine. I had a whole preface to this speech so that I could protect your white fragility and I wouldn't put you off and I wouldn't push you away so that you would remain my ally. But screw that, I'm not gonna do that. Thank you for teaching me that. I wrote this speech about a month and a half ago. I work in education and healthcare, and being a native Spanish speaker, born and raised in South America, which is not in Africa, by the way. And I have my own history of both white privilege and white oppression. I don't need to go into that right now, but I wrote this speech because I am dedicating my professional career to helping bilingual English-Spanish kids in Vermont access their human rights to education and health in their native language. And every time I say this, people look at me. Well, first of all, they ask me if I'm the Spanish teacher, as if my brain couldn't do anything else but teach something that I've been doing since I was 1.5 years old. But I am not. And the next line is always like, oh, of all the places in the country, I would have never guessed that your services were needed in Vermont. I have heard this both from people of color and from white folks. So my speech that I'm gonna read you in a second speaks to my deep desire to ask you all respectfully, I hope this does feel like a pull-in and not a push out, whatever you call it, but I am trusting that you're not too fragile, that you can handle this the same way that I have to handle everything every day. Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and many other people of color, we are here in Vermont, we exist, and we have just as much right to be considered Vermonters as anybody else. Gracias. As after hearing all the other amazing people speaking, I just want to say that any similarity to what everybody else said is probably not purely coincidental. One last thing before I dive into my speak and I give the mic back to our wonderful Black community behind me. I don't want to take more of your time. I was supposed to read this speech about a month ago where a person who was organizing a rally for Black Lives Matter, a person in Jericho, who said she didn't identify as white because she doesn't see race. She thinks we're all the same human race. And I called her out on some problematic things she said. She didn't like it. And yet I helped her organize it because I believed the cause was bigger than her and me. I actually spent 2 hours writing a press release that she, without any payment or any acknowledgement, actually used. So she benefited from my free labor and 22 years of education. And so then I was like, okay, I would like to say this speech at your rally. And she answered back saying like, well, I think we should have the voices of Black people too. And I was like, yes, of course. Like, please do not let this voice of a Latinx, light-skinned woman who has only been in the US for a little over a decade silence or take the place of other people whose history of racism in the US is way longer than mine. So she's like, no, you don't understand. I think you should not speak, and we should just read a poem by a person of color. And I was like, why can't, I mean, the rally is at least an hour long. Why can't we do both? She told me it wasn't my place. I don't know if my pain wasn't painful enough, if my words weren't true enough. I don't know. All I know is that she took 2 hours of labor and 22 years of education that I had and used the 2-page press release that I wrote and then silenced me because once a white woman who doesn't see color, yet she organizes a rally for Black Lives Matter, is telling me that my voice is not important, that it's not my place and time to speak. That was probably already one speech in and on itself, so thank you, and let me get into the actual speech. While the country claims Black Lives Matter, BIPOCs in Vermont are still hoarse from yelling, our lives are here. This is an open letter to whomever needs it. I am talking to you today to denounce racism in general in our state and to ask you to stop perpetrating the myth that Vermont is all white. Racism, by definition, is a systemic oppression of one group who obtained power by applying physical, emotional, financial, mental, and spiritual violence over groups that they have deemed unworthy of the same level of power and humanity based on the color of their skin and their ethnicity. Racism is made of complex systems of oppression that get in the way of non-white communities for accessing the human and constitutional rights to equitable education, healthcare, and their pursuit of happiness. Anti-Blackness overlaps with and differs from racism. Anti-Blackness is its own phenomenon in the US. I have been fighting my own ingrained anti-Blackness and have no right to point my finger at anyone else on this subject. In terms of anti-Blackness, my lane is to be an ally and an abolitionist. Please remember that word. In 2018, SNL broadcasted its infamous skit calling Vermont a Confederate paradise. I laughed at its keen observation of the traditional Vermont way of life. After all, I have seen my own fair share of bandana donning pooch at local farmer markets. And I was also deeply irked by its false assumption that Vermonters are all white, a dangerous assumption perpetuated by most Vermonters themselves. While white Vermonters are taken to the streets chanting Black Lives Matter, which, parentheses, they very much do, the US was both funded and founded on the backs of enslaved Africans. To this day, the Black body is seen as both dangerous and as a medium for macabre entertainment. Sorry, I obviously edited my speech wrong, but as white Vermonters are taken to the streets chanting Black Lives Matter, and as hopeful and grateful I feel to see all the Black Lives Matter signs around our community, and by all the anti-racist book clubs that have been organized, the workshops, the talks that my white neighbors are organizing. However, I can't help but wonder, how many of these same neighbors have had any significant, prolonged, and meaningful relationship with a Black, Indigenous, or any other person of color in Vermont? And I'm talking about really prolonged, not just my best friend in high school for a semester was Black. Or not just, oh yeah, I know Spanish, I took it 2 semesters in high school. How many of them are using their BIPOC child, spouse, best friend, or coworker as an excuse to claim that they cannot possibly be racist? How many of them have found themselves in routine situations where being white is actually the minority, where the power differential is shifted against them? How many of them have claimed time and time again not to be racist, only to turn around and say that their schools, organizations, workplace, places of worship did not need to work on equity because we are all white anyway? What does it matter? Or even worse, that they should work on it only to prevent that one person of color from complaining about racism. Black people across the country are still fighting the 4-century-old fight of asking their oppressors to stop oppressing them, to value their humanity, to let them reclaim systemic power over their own lives. In Vermont, Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and any other people of color, by the way, Vermont is 90% non-Hispanic white compared to the 60% national average. And that is by design, like somebody else said. So us are still fighting not only for white Vermonters to recognize that our lives matter, but for white Vermonters to acknowledge that our lives exist, that we occupy a space in the state, that we have as much a right to be here as the farmer who can't claim a single flatlander amongst their relatives since the time their great-great-grandfather moved to Vermont. White, liberal, Bernie-loving, tree-hugging, colorblind, everyone is equal Vermonters, this letter is for you. Wake up. Stop erasing our existence. Wake up. We need you to abolish white supremacy. Wake up. Our lives are not your intellectual exercise, your self-improvement quest, your collegiate conversation. Wake up. Acknowledge your local history of eugenics and oppression. Teach it to your kids. Demand that your schools teach it. Wake up. Demand that your representatives abolish racist laws. Wake up. Demand of yourself the gift of losing the fear of being called a racist. There is not a chance that you don't have racism in you because the system is racist. So wake up. Give yourself the gift of not being scared of making a mistake, of being called a racist, because that fear has kept you cozy and safe in your inaction for far too long. Wake up. Stop asking us to absolve you, but telling us how heartbroken you are over the realities that you have been witnessing, not living, for the past couple of months, not decades, not centuries. Wake up. Don't you dare, after this summer, however long these rallies go on for, to go back to your cozy, comfortable Vermont ways. Wake up. When the chief of the Burlington Police Department, I witnessed this myself, stands in front of a crowd during a Black Lives Matter rally, and he says that police officers are the first line of defense because mental health organizations have fizzled out. Ask yourselves why. Why are police officers getting paid to react violently in situations that could have been safely handled, or even better, avoided altogether, by a robust network of social programs, job creation, education, and equitable health services? And I am not talking, thank you, gracias. I am not talking about, when I say equitable, it means people from underappreciated and undervalued communities need that leg up that you already have. I'm not saying let's elevate everybody. Nobody wants to live on welfare. Let's help the people with the help they need, not with charity. So, why do the police continue to receive generous funding while community services are allowed to fizzle out? Wake up. Ask yourselves, how come the government couldn't find translators and interpreters to make sure that public health information about COVID-19 be accessible to all Vermonters, even those whose English is not their first language, especially those who are predominantly represented in the cleaning services at UVM Medical Center and who need that information even more than anybody else, and who have been here for years? I cannot believe the government didn't realize they needed information in their native language. Wake up. Learn about how the police unions in this country wield so much power that our politicians are terrified of angering them. And so I am. And so am I. And yet, I am here speaking out. Wake up. Demand to see the conditions of the hut or trailer where your neighbors keep their migrant farm workers. And then dare come and tell me that slavery has been abolished in the US. I've seen them. I work with those kids. I know I'm not black, but kids who look and sound like me are being kept in cages right now. Wake up. Accept that when you talk about a good school district, you mean that most students are white, affluent, native English speakers. School segregation is still very real. Wake up. Use your financial power to be an abolitionist. Wake up. Use the equity you've earned from generations of your family owning stolen land to be an abolitionist. Wake up. Use your white voice, your white body, your white life to be an abolitionist. Wake up. If you're still wondering whether claiming that Black Lives Matter may be an issue of personal, religious, or political opinion, like a coworker told me, better suited for private conversations among like-minded friends, then I am more afraid of you than I am of my neighbor who is flying the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. Because at least I can see him coming. At least he is awake. He may have chosen a truth that I find inhuman and despicable. He may wish to hurt me because of my truth, but at least he is not hiding his truth. So white liberal Vermonters, if you truly think that your truth is racial equity and the abolition of white supremacy, then wake up and then stay awake. Gracias.
Wow. I want to tell you something about being black in Vermont. I had a friend who lived up in Franklin County where I live. It's a very white county. And she says, I gotta go. I gotta go. There's not enough of us around here. So she moved to just outside of Montpelier. Last time I was in Montpelier, it was cold, and I was walking down the sidewalk with Serena, and I see her a few blocks away. She's on the phone. She doesn't see me, and she looks up, and she just disconnects, and she starts crying. And I think something really bad happened on the phone call, and I go up to her, and she just wraps me up in her arms, and I do the same. And she said, how do you do it? How do you not see your own kind? I have not been held or seen a black person in over 2 weeks. How? It's so lonely. So incredibly lonely to not be seen. A man I've known for 14 years now, where I volunteer at a library, stopped me a couple weeks ago and said, oh my goodness, I love your food truck. I don't have a food truck. The only other black woman in my town who is 30 years younger than me has the food truck. I've checked out his books for years. This was not what I was going to say. I was going to tell you that I am Ellen, and I am privileged, and I am challenged, and I am joyful because I get to be Serena's mother. When she was in 2nd or 3rd grade, you're going to hate me for this, she came home, and she said, Mom, she was so excited. Mom, guess what? In school, we all figured out what we were, and I know what I am. And I was terrified. I didn't know what was coming at me. She said, so-and-so is helpful, and so is funny, and me? Me, I'm resistant. With all the self-possession she had, she said, I am resistant. That means standing up against. That means leaning into. That means taking the hit and then giving it back. She is a junior at Mount Mansfield. They defaced the Black Lives Matter sign, and she said, we got to do something. I'm going to hold a rally. Yeah. And then she put out a call to every student she knew. She reached out through email. She reached out through the school board, and nobody came. Do you know what that does? She formed Cougars of Color to give voice to all the unheard, and none of them came. Or none of them felt they could speak. None of them trusted that they would be heard. I say Black Lives Matter a lot. And there are those people that hear me say only Black Lives Matter. I would never say that, because that would be denying my ancestors, my great-grandmother who was Native American, my mother who is Greek. That would be calling them nothing, and they are everything. I'm going to tangent for a second, because I want to talk to my brothers and sisters. There is a system that was created by the massa years ago. They would take a woman and they would rape her. Then they would take her children and remove them. They would sell them or house them elsewhere. And then when the females came of breeding age, and mind you, we're talking under 5th grade here, so you can put it in perspective, they bred them. And they created colorism. They separated us. They put some of us who were lighter in the big house, and they left the darker people in the fields to toil and grow remorseful and jealousy and anger towards one another, and separated us. Their intention was to enslave our minds and our perceptions of one another so that we wouldn't run together. Well, abolitionists came, slavery went, but colorism is still here. It's still strong, and they're still trying to use it to divide us. Good hair, good skin. Let me say something. Internal colorism is when you see the blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl on the magazine and you think you can't be beautiful. And then internal colorism in a community is when you look at one another and only see the difference and only see the value that our oppressors gave to that difference. You said only 2 Black people stepped on this stage. And I have to say, my daughter spoke first. And it matters. So, when I say Black Lives Matter, and they hear only Black Lives Matter, their response is all lives matter, which I have never denied. But some lives in America seem to matter more than others. Some lives can stand on the mountaintop and say, I am here, I have value, and nobody listens. And some lives can whisper in the middle of 5th Avenue, and traffic will stop and the world will stand still. My life matters. For a lot of years we said, our lives mattered too, from shackles and whipping boards. Our lives mattered too, being raped, running with the hounds. Our lives mattered too, up north hiding, being lynched. Our lives mattered too. And then, in 2013, 3 Black women said, enough is enough. Our Black Lives Matter, period. Our Black Lives Matter, exclamation point. Our Black Lives Matter with no apologies. And we have been marching and rallying and petitioning and yelling till we're hoarse for 7 years. Where were you? When Eric Gardner said, "I can't breathe," they showed it on TV, the same news. Where were you? You are here because the world stood still. You are here because the coronavirus jumped in your lives and stopped your routine. When I see a lot of faces and I see the signs, people ask me, doesn't it give you hope? And I honestly can't say yes. Because this situation is going to end. Schedules will kick back in. Children will have soccer. There will be meetings that have to be gotten to. There will be dinners. There will be anniversaries. It will snow. And where will you be? I cannot be hopeful because I am left with the question, will my life matter when you aren't looking? Will they continue to change laws and topple statues? Will they mourn our dead? I don't know. I don't trust you. I want to. You're my community, but I don't. I want to share a poem. I retired it a while ago with Rajni. It's called Televised. Watching nightly news on the TV. Another brother downed. Tragedy. Ain't part of my reality. No skin off me. The whole world's gone crazy, I swear, with no humanity to spare. It's just madness out there. Thank God I'm here, where we are all so civilized, preferring our genocides televised, 90-second spots that leave us scandalized, but never galvanized. The price of my complacency will be complete when I recognize the blood running down my street, begging at my door for me to get up out my seat, raise my voice, raise my fist, pound my feet. But life is so messy, and their lies are so neat. Sometimes you gotta tear down the old to build up the new. The foundation of our nation is rotten through and through. There is more than a blue wall standing between me and you. There are oceans of blood dripping from a swinging noose. Sometimes I feel this pressure from within, just under the surface of my skin. It wants release. Will this perpetual shade over my shade never cease? Imagine your complexion was a source of suspicion for your first line of protection, the police. Would you trust the heart behind the badge is offering you peace while his trigger hand rests on his piece? Next time you're sitting back with your TV on, unarmed black man killed. Damn, they got another one. He may have been someone's father. He was probably someone's brother. He was most definitely a now grieving mother's son. Ask yourself, what could I have? What should I have? Dear God, what have I done?
Thanks, Mom. So I don't want to say very much. Not because I feel like my voice is being taken away or anything like that. I want to clear up one thing that I get asked a lot. And I appreciate the question. I know what you're trying to say. I get asked, how can I help? What can I do? How can I be an ally? And I've decided my response will be this. It will not be what to do, but what not to do. They say the revolution will not be televised, but it is being broadcasted, headlined, retweeted. Unmarked cars sweeping people off the streets, suicidal black men found hung from trees. The revolution will not be televised, yet you continue to fetishize. By now, you would be hard-pressed to find someone in our country who doesn't recognize the name George Floyd, who couldn't tell you how he died, who hadn't watched the recording of his murder, who hadn't sat there sickened, demoralized, horrified, who hadn't pressed replay 1, 2, 3 times. Lynching is such an ugly word, but the mob-strung murder of black men used to be considered great fun, quite the spectacle, the perfect entertainment for your family's Friday night picnic. Faces of our brothers were plastered on postcards now. If you are asking yourself, how could people so casually watch the murder of another human being, I beg you to ask yourself, why do you continue to watch Mr. Floyd be choked to death? We all know what happened. You are not educating yourself. Why are you watching? These last 4 months have led to an increase in recognition to black voice, black experience, and black life. It has led to many African Americans being asked to relay their often negative experiences, similar to how I have asked our community members to speak here today. But don't be deceived by the systematic prejudice that exists in our minds. Black struggle is not shared to be fetishized. It doesn't matter how sickening you find it. If you continue to watch George Floyd being killed, you are making it a spectacle. Our trauma is not a spectacle. Our trauma is not a spectacle. Stop watching the video. That's all I ask. Stop watching the video. Now, as I said, I don't want to say much, but I do want to point out that we are here on the 79th anniversary of Emmett Till. And I would hope that all of you would know who Emmett Till was. But if not, I'll give you a very quick rundown. Too quick. Emmett Till was 14 when he was accused of whistling at a white woman in a store. 4 days later, that woman's husband and his brother, Roy Brandt and J.W. Willem, kidnapped Emmett. They beat him savagely before shooting him in the head and throwing him down the river. Emmett's story is not unique. It is one that has been repeated for decades and decades, centuries. It was not his death, his age, his color, or any physical factor that resulted in us remembering his name. It was the response to it. For the spark that we call civil rights movement, the great civil rights movement that we learned about in history class, supported by the wonderful hero, Black Dr. Martin Luther King, the civil rights movement transformed America. Goodbye racism, hello freedom. Emmett Till sparked that. He did all of that by dying. Now, I want you to think about your history class. How often have you celebrated the civil rights movement? Now think that we are here because George Floyd was murdered, because another black man, years older, yes, was murdered. This is the same spark that Emmett Till had, but it went out. The civil rights movement took place and it went out. We shut up. George Floyd is dead and so are so many others. Don't let there be another one. We cannot let this spark go out. I beg you, and I beg everybody at my school and the community, next time this happens, I want to see this field full. Don't let the spark go out. Thank you.
I've lived, excuse me, I've lived in Vermont for 55 years, up the hill in Jericho Center for 53 years. When I came to Vermont to teach at the University of Vermont, I had no idea what the real work of my life would turn out to be after I saw nothing but whiteness. White people, white students, white snow. In recent years, I've been examining my own history. This is a poem that, with apologies to Rajni and Ellen and Serena, they've heard it before. The title is Long Hot Summers. In August of 1955, at 17, no more on my mind than going away to college in September. I worked noon times in my father's store after long mornings under the tobacco shed, where mounting heat beat down to ripple in waves along the tin roof. At the store's lunch counter, I assembled hot dogs by the dozens at 2 for a quarter, stacked moon pies, and pulled cold RCs from the cooler, greeting each customer by name. Charlie Littlejohn, Andrew Kelly, his sisters Pinky and Janie, Thelma Williams, and Earl Crutchfield. I took worn dollar bills from hands, black hands and white, my hands and theirs, calloused with sticky traces of black tar from a morning of working together, handling tobacco to cure slowly in tall tobacco barns. When I placed change, silver and copper, onto their outstretched palms, those coins felt cool against the lingering heat from our skin. Was it during one of these moments, while I, a white store owner's daughter, was making change for black and white farm laborers, exchanging the day-to-day news of our small town? Was it then that in Money, Mississippi, 14-year-old Emmett Till might have whistled at, said something to the white store owner's wife, sounds still in dispute, words perhaps never uttered at all? What we'll never know from lips forever sealed. Only hours later, in the brutal violation of that other teenager's still growing body. Was that the summer the KKK left a stack of printed brochures on the store counter, papers my father set afire on the cement pavement, separating the store from the gas pumps. Did I remember those summer days in my own small town, North Carolina life, when in 1956 I returned to school after another long hot summer of working in tobacco and clerking at the store, to find my North Carolina Women's College had integrated itself by placing its first 2 young black women in isolation, just the 2 of them living together on a single dormitory floor, separated from all the others in their freshman class. Just last summer, nearly 60 years later, I returned to another North Carolina August of humid, heat-filled days, with slow hours passing through heavy, moisture-laden air, to join my sister as we finished cleaning out our mother's house, the repository of 75 years of her adult life. What began as sorting into piles of what to save and what to load into my son's pickup soon turned into an excavation as we unearthed artifacts of a life we could only ever partially know or understand. Fragments of writing in her hand about an unnamed person she had never been able to forgive. This in notes while reading C.S. Lewis on prayer. A facsimile of Lincoln's 1863 Gettysburg Address, folded with care to enclose a KKK broadside dated 1983, as if one document might obliterate or cancel out the other. Both documents yellowed and brittle with age. Messages, indictments, acknowledgments, the yearning to understand and to be forgiven for the sins crossing and burdening our generations into yet another August day, marking the passing of a long, hot summer in yet another century. Thank you.
No problem. Let's see how far forward I can get here. Sisters and brothers, afternoon. One of the interesting things about being last on the list is most of the things that you have to say are said and done. So I'm going to try my best to summarize what I was here to share with you all about, and that is a bit of my story. For once, I can say that I am not the only black person here who grew up in Vermont. I'm very thankful for that. But I also have a lot of people that I have to thank for just being here today. I'm thankful for Serena for organizing this whole event. Thankful to Ellen for raising her. I am thankful to Mr. Lacey for so nicely summarizing how you don't have a state that's 95% white by accident. I'm also thankful to my friend Rajni for saying the names of the men and the women and the boys and the girls who have lost their lives during this time in our lives and over the past 400 years, and reminding us that so many more whose names are left unsaid and unremembered have also lost their lives due to racism and systemic racism within our society. I am thankful for all these people and all the people who have sacrificed so that I can stand here in front of you with this little collar on my neck and say that I am Reverend Devin Thomas. I am the minister of the Second Congregational Church in Jeffersonville. I am also the minister of the Waterville Union Church in the United Church of Bakersfield and Fairfield. I can also say that I am an alumni of MMU, graduating from the class of 2004. And yeah, I know that means I'm old now. I can say all these things because people have broken their backs to put me here, so that I can say to you, silence is violence. And I thank you all for being here with us today. Yeah, you're late, but now that you're here, we can start getting to work. And that is vitally important. You know, I grew up here in I'm so used to saying Jeffersonville, Jericho and Underhill. And I do have to say that the story, what Mr. Lacey told us about is very true. There is a narrative, a story that we are told when we are children growing up here in Vermont. And that story goes up very much like Serena put it. We had a problem with racism. And then Dr. King came along and saved us. Or then Obama came along and we were able to put it all behind us. And now we live in a state where so many people believe and say that all lives matter. But that's not true. It's not true because too many lives within this nation are made to be silent. They're made to get down on one knee. They're told that they are not fully American. How can we say that all lives matter when Black lives don't matter in this country, when Hispanic lives do not matter, where the lives of people who are LGBTQ do not matter, when the lives of Native American people within our society do not matter? How can we say that all lives matter without that being a lie? We stay silent about that reality. We keep our lips sealed. We don't want to recognize it because we want to believe the stories that we were told when we were growing up, that Vermont is a forward-thinking society, that we are a state that has it all figured out, that the people here care about their neighbors, that the people here will stand up to injustice. We want to believe that this is a utopia, that the entire nation should strive to be, but it's not. And that silence is violent. Because when we perpetuate that myth, when we detach ourselves from the reality of what people have to deal with in this world, you leave them ill-equipped to face it when it pops up in their lives. How do we look at what we've seen in the news when we saw George Floyd put to death by the police? How do we face the reality that before that, there was Michael Brown? Before that, there was Trayvon Martin. Before that, there was Emmett Till. And before even Emmett Till, there were millions of others who have lost their lives due to our inability to accept that all lives do matter. But we don't treat them that way. I grew up with those myths. I believed them. I didn't have anything to debunk them. And so when I went out into the world and I lived my own life, I wasn't really equipped to understand why when me and my Hispanic and my Asian and my Black friends got together in a parking lot, a police officer was always kind enough to stop by and say hi. I didn't understand why so many of my friends' parents were in prison. I didn't understand why it was so hard for my colleagues at work to go to the hospital or to hold a job. I didn't understand the way in which the system in which we live keeps people of color from being able to rise and enjoy the benefits that so many of us here in Underhill and Jericho and in Vermont can take for granted. I wasn't able to understand that because I grew up in a cloud of silence. And the people in my life whom were educating me, were trying to teach me how to be a functional adult, they too grew up in that cloud of silence. We all were ignorant about the realities of racism. And that had a very harmful effect. Because it means as long as we are silent, we are a part of the problem. Here in Vermont, so many of us have the privilege to go home at the end of the day and to forget that we have a problem with racism. So many of us have the ability to turn our heads, even when faced with the reality of racism, faced with the black bodies, the brown bodies, the native bodies of our history and in our present. We have the ability to look the other way and say, it's their fault. I have nothing to do with it. We have the privilege to remain silent. And as long as we remain silent, people continue to be hurt. People continue to die. That is a privilege, but it's also not right. And so it is important for us to break that silence. It's important for us to educate ourselves and to talk about the ways in which the system, the society that we live, are allowing for these injustices to continue. They allow for us to live in a situation where people have to get up and say, my life matters too. But as my brothers and sisters who are over in Montpelier, and I was not in Montpelier from what you all say, I wish I was. From what you've all said, we shouldn't have to say that. That should be self-evident. But we have to fight for it. Because unfortunately, too many of our brothers and our sisters in this society and in this state don't. You are here now. And that means we can get to work. We can get to work on breaking the silence. We can get to work on talking about the issues. We can ask ourselves those tough questions. You know, we are living in a society, in a nation, where 13% of the national population are black people. Why is it that 30% of stops nationwide come from that 13%? Why is it that 36% of all prison inmates come from that 13%? Why is it that the majority of that 13% are poor? Why is it the majority of that 13% cannot afford to live in their own home? They cannot afford to get a good education. Why is it the majority of that 13% can't expect to live past 80? There's something wrong with that. There is something disproportionate about that. When we recognize the problem, we can start to examine the problem. And when we examine the problem, we can come up with solutions. Brothers and sisters, you being here right now, that is a part of the solution. It's not a check in your checkbook to mark off, but it is a part of how we start this conversation and how we start to make lasting change in our state. It's a part of how we start to break the silence that has been going on for too long here in Vermont. It's a part of how we start to come together in a state where we truly can say that all lives matter, where we can make that myth a reality. Because truth of the matter is, I do want to see it be a reality. But in order for us to make it a reality, we need to start somewhere. We need to start by saying Black lives matter too. We break the silence by talking to our friends and our family about systemic racism, even when they don't want to hear it. We break the silence by coming out and speaking to our elected officials. We break the silence by electing people of color. Oh, I don't see Keisha anymore. By electing people of color into office so that they can speak and put, the perspective of people of color into our national and state conversations. We break the silence by telling people that we want change, by showing up to these rallies. You know, this last month, the city of Burlington designated $1 million to the construction of a cultural center for people of color. That would not be possible if white people did not stand up and join their voices with people of color saying that we want change. And, you know, it's just a drop in the bucket. I really do hope that that cultural center gets built, because that would be a place where people can go and get educated on what we're talking about here today. We need our educational institutions to be talking about systemic racism and how it is still with us here. We need to be equipping our children, our young adults, to go into the world understanding how to identify and see systemic racism when it's right in front of their face. We break the silence by talking and allowing that talk to turn into action. We break the silence by allowing our souls to be enlightened. Brothers and sisters, each and every one of you have a power. You have the power of a voice that people listen to. You know, in 2012, when Trayvon Martin was killed, people got together. People called out. They said, Black Lives Matter. We marched, we yelled, we did everything in our power to make change. But people just went back to their daily lives, and not much was said or done after that. Now that George Floyd has died, we are seeing things change a little bit. And the key factor to that is that black people are not marching alone this time. This time we have you all with us. Your power allows for us to make real change. Because if this country, if this state is going to be a place where all of us can live, where our lives matter, we need to make that change together. We need for people who are white, people who have privilege, to listen to the voices of black and brown and native and Hispanic people. We need you to take us seriously. We need you to help us out. Give us a hand when we say that we need to make reforms to the way in which we do policing, the ways in which we treat our poor, the ways in which we educate. When you do this, when we start to do this, we can dismantle the systems of silence that we have been living in. We can end the violence, and we can truly say that our lives matter.
All right. Wonderful. We are coming to the end of the speech. Sorry, I'll take my glasses off. We are coming to the end of the speaker portion of this. And I want to say thank you to everybody who spoke, everybody who listened, everybody who helped some understand. So round of applause to everybody. I also want to convey a message that the group Black Perspective that stood up here, and they talked for a minute, you might remember that. They wanted me to make sure I tell. They wanted me to make sure that I tell you all that I'm very thankful you are here. But it does not end here. Along the back, we have booths set up by our wonderful librarians with resources where you guys can educate yourselves further. We have places where you can register to vote, to get our voices heard on larger platforms. We have someone who is sharing their voice in their book out front, and I beg you, support them, look at it, hear them. Please, your support and your work does not end when you leave here today. I want you to all to ask at least one person you know, what did you do? What did you do today? They say nothing. Went to the beach, hung out with my friends, went biking. Why didn't they come? Did they know? Tell them. Next time something like this happens, it should not just be us. And before we close, I also want to point out that we have an area in the back where I want to talk to people. I don't want to stand here, 50 feet away from some of you. I want to talk to you, and you can do that by painting a lawn sign with me. I'm going to be in the back painting. If you want to come paint with me, paint, show your support every day. Because some people, they're not able to. My grandfather can't. He's black in North Carolina. He doesn't feel comfortable putting a Black Lives Matter sign out on his lawn. Do you? If so, then do it. I also want to say that we are here to honor Emmett Till. And I would love it if you would all join me in singing happy birthday to him. Right? That's what you do on somebody's birthday. All right, and we're going to, yes, we want to have our wonderful musicians come up and play for us. Exactly. Yes, how he died was tragic, but his life is still something worth celebrating.
Let's do it your D. So my F. You ready?
I'm so ready. Are you guys ready? Yeah! All right.
Okay.
Do I go? Okay.
Sam, count us in.
Count us in, Sam.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Emmett Till. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Serena.
Yes. Thank you all. We will be in the back painting signs. Check out the library. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you.